Welcome, everyone. I am Tom Kimbis. I'm Executive Director of the National Postdoctoral Association, or the NPA. It's a pleasure to have you here today. I am a middle-aged white male with graying brown hair wearing a checked blue and white dress shirt today. Each year for the past 4 years, we've hosted an equity summit at the NPA, covering issues related to a traditionally underserved population of the postdoctoral community and/or exploring issues related to that population. We hosted a gender equity conference in 2021, a race and ethnicity conference in 2022, and last year an event focused on international scholars and the issues that they face. All of these are available to you at no charge on the NPA website at www.nationalpostdoc.org in the resource library. This year, we're proud to host our first NPA Accessibility and Inclusion Equity Summit. This summit seeks to identify barriers and the paths forward to greater accessibility and inclusion across postdoctoral communities. Areas of focus in today's event include accessibility and inclusion for individuals with visible and invisible disabilities and neurodiverse individuals that allow them to thrive in their postdoctoral work and beyond. This summit is designed to shine a spotlight on the barriers that can inhibit full accessibility within the postdoctoral community, as well as pathways to increase accessibility and inclusion. Today, we seek to amplify messaging from the lived and professional experiences of neurodiverse individuals or people with disabilities that many in the postdoctoral space may be unfamiliar with. At the end of today's summit, our hope is not to have solved all these complex issues surrounding accessibility and inclusion, but rather to prompt more thought, more discussion, and more action towards achieving justice and equity for everyone in the postdoctoral communities. The summit will include American Sign Language translation services throughout the event and visual descriptions of our participants. Note that today's summit consists of 4 sessions. The first 3 will be held on this Zoom, with each session ending 55 minutes past the hour, and then the next session starting at the top of the hour. If you're registered for that 4th session, which is our workshop, you'll have received a separate Zoom invitation, and you'll have access that session using the separate Zoom link that you received from us. During today's summit, if you do have questions for the panelists, that's great. Please use the Q&A function rather than the chat button. The chat is more for general discussion about activities that occur during the sessions. The Q&A function will send your questions to the moderator and the panelists. Sometimes the Q&A function is accessed using the More button on your Zoom display. This summit will be recorded and available for viewing in about a week or so in the NPA Resource Library and open to the full community. Most NPA events are open to our members. Today's is available to the full community, as I mentioned. And if you're not a member of the NPA already, you can join for free by visiting the NPA website I mentioned, if you're in academia or your employer is already an NPA member. If you have any questions, just please let me know. Lastly, the NPA Annual Conference is taking place in Boston on March 21st and 22nd. It's a fantastic event and the peak of our activities at the NPA each year. Early bird registration closes a week from today on November 15th. Be sure to secure your space there, and I look forward to meeting you in Boston. I'm now happy to turn this over to thank Dr. Khushbu Rana, who's a postdoctoral researcher at Pacific Northwest National Laboratory, PNNL, and chair of the NPA Diversity Committee. Khushbu?
Thank you very much, Tom. I'm Khushbu Rana. I'm a brown male with the black eyes and black hair. And on behalf of the Diversity Committee, I would like to welcome once again those who have joined from across the country and around the globe to this year's NPA Equity Summit on Accessibility and Inclusion. The first session will be focused on the topic of neurodiversity, barriers, equity, and inclusion, which is a topic that is very important and relevant to the postdoctoral communities. The moderator of this session will be Angela Fowler. Angela Fowler is a first-generation college graduate and was the first person in her family to receive a Ph.D. She has a Ph.D. in microbiology from the University of Kansas, where she worked on herpes simplex virus type 1. She then went on to do a postdoc on viral immunology, studying Zika and dengue viruses. Angela is currently the Director, Office of Postdoctoral Affairs at Indiana University School of Medicine, where she assists and advocates for postdocs, in addition to co-leading graduate and postdoctoral career and professional development. Angela is neurodivergent herself with ADHD and autism. Without further ado, I would like to request Angela to lead the session.
Hello, and thank you for attending. Thank you, Kusbu, for that nice introduction. I will add I am a white woman with a shaved head, a dark green shirt, pearl necklace, rainbow orb earrings, and cat eye glasses. This session, we will start with quick introductions from our panelists. Then we will have questions for the panelists who will answer in the same order for each question. Finally, we will, with the remaining time we will take questions from the audience. So remember to put those in the question and answer box and not the chat so they don't get lost in the chat. So without further ado, I will let AJ get us started.
Hey y'all, my name is AJ Link. Hopefully you can hear me. I'm a black dude with a beard. I've got on a yellow sweater, bright yellow sweater, and a black and pink Seattle Mariners hat. I'm happy to be here. I don't really know what I'm supposed to do besides introduction. Should I just like say what I do or who I am, or is that enough?
Yeah, you can say what you do, where you work if you would like.
Okay. Yeah. I do a bunch of disability advocacy. I've helped start a few nonprofits and run a few disability nonprofits. A lot of my advocacy has been focused in the higher ed space, specifically law schools, but other higher ed spaces like graduate schools and medical schools. I've done a little bit of P12 disability advocacy, like IDEA stuff, which is the conclude. Oh, I always forget that law. It's a Disability Inclusion Act for P12 students. And yeah, I've done some other advocacy things too.
Thank you. Ashley?
Hi, this is Ashley Shue. Can you hear me? Oh, good. Um, I am a white woman with reddish hair sitting in front of a yellow wall, and I have safety cone earrings. And I don't know if you can tell that I am wearing a R2D2 shirt, but I hope you can. I work as an associate professor of science, technology, and society at Virginia Tech. My specialty areas are philosophy of technology, emerging technologies, animal studies, and disability studies. And I'm really interested in the expertise that disabled people are often uncredited for, but should be.
Thank you. Dave?
Hey folks, I'm Dave Caudell. I'm the Associate Director of the Frist Center for Autism and Innovation at Vanderbilt University. I'm an autism self-advocate, a proud father of 3 young adults on the spectrum. I have ASD and ADHD and severe sensory processing disorder. I got my PhD at Vanderbilt University in 2017. For the last 7 years, I've been working at the Frist Center for Autism and Innovation, and my advocacy focused on neurodivergence in the workplace, and I do a lot of work working with mentoring grad students, particularly those with disabilities and challenges.
All right, and Holden.
Hey, everybody. I'm Holden Thorpe. I'm a 60-year-old white man with white hair and a plaid jacket. And I'm autistic. And I'm also this editor of the Science Family of Journals. And pleased to be here with everybody. And thanks to the MPA for doing this, supporting graduate students and postdocs and advocating for them is at the top of my list of important things to do in my role. And happy to be here to be part of that. But congratulations to you for convening these folks.
All right, thank you, panelists. So let's get started. We're going to do sort of an introductory to the topic. So for people joining us who are new to the topic, what is neurodivergence and what are some examples of being neurodivergent? AJ, do you want to start again?
Yeah, sure. So neurodiversity as a concept and a movement has been around for a while now. I would say for me personally, neurodiversity is the understanding that human minds vary and differ, and we all have different ways of processing the world, and getting to our thoughts. I think what type of neurodivergence there is varies depending on who you're asking, but I'm autistic. I would say that I fall under the neurodivergent umbrella. Some autistic people don't feel that way, which is fine, fine to self-identify. But I also think it's broader than just that. Sometimes people want to silo it to autism and ADHD, but I feel like things like TBIs, which are traumatic brain injuries, I would even say like schizophrenia would, in my understanding of neurodiversity, fall under neurodivergence. I'm happy for other people to talk to their experience and how they kind of view neurodiversity.
Thank you, Ashley.
Yeah, I'm not autistic. Okay, surprise. For in terms of this panel, that might matter. I learned I was neurodivergent from student organizers at Virginia Tech when we were founding our Disability Alliance. Um, I have chemo brain, which is sort of the long-term cognitive effects of chemotherapy for me. It was chemotherapy I got about 10 years ago now. And I can remember waking up each day and knowing what day of the week it was and what I'd be doing that day. And I don't have that any longer. Like I actually experienced like this change in my cognition that, might have been somewhat trackable if we were tracking. But I have, different issues with remembering what time it is, getting lost in time. Like I don't know how long things take. I have to look at the clock a lot. I have to look at my schedule a lot. Not all of this is always felt as impairment. I've had to learn from my friends with ADHD, like how they show up to things on time because they also get lost in time. So I really benefit from neurodivergent community. And I've learned so much. If you tell me you have ADHD, I'm just gonna like study what you're doing to be an effective human being because I know that like my chemo brain rings like ADHD and I'm gonna learn things from you. So one of the things I really like about neurodiversity is it's this big umbrella that has, mental health disorders as part of it, that has people with acquired types of neurodivergence, like me with chemo brain, and people with TBIs and other, brain differences. It's not meant to be like, here are the diagnostic categories that fit under these things. It's a community term. So even without a diagnosis, people can realize that they're not thinking in neurotypical ways and that what they're experiencing, like people with PTSD often have different experiences of time, of memory, of organization, of communication, of sensory processing, all of these things that sort of fit under this big umbrella. And I like that it's sometimes a space where we can exchange tips and tricks and maybe, some of those in the process today. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Community is so important. I've learned so much from my community. All right, Dave.
Yeah, so the when I'm thinking about neurodiversity itself, I tend to think about the neuromajority. Is so much of our systems and organizations and how we do things and how we raise people and how we prepare them for the workplace, how we integrate them into society is built around this sort of like one size fits all, sort of like all these assumptions that everybody is as capable in all ways as the neuromajority is. And those of us who are neurodivergent, and in a lot of ways, we're just like everybody else. In fact, all of us, we have more in common with each other as human beings than our differences. But some of our differences can create barriers, can create all sorts of problems and challenges and stuff. If your mind works differently, sometimes what works well for everybody else doesn't work well for you. Sometimes it's harmful for you. So traditionally in the past, we were just falling through the cracks and expected to either find a way to walk and talk and act like a normal person and be as capable as a normal person, or just end up being unemployed or underemployed. When you look at the autistic community in particular, over 80% of autistic adults are unemployed or underemployed. That includes people with bachelor's degrees. That even includes people with PhDs. And so what keeps me motivated each day is figuring out what is needed for us to find and thrive in meaningful employment from a strengths-based approach. How can we be more inclusive? Can we look back at the drawing board and look at what elements that we assumed worked well for everybody is not working well for this population? And then can we make some changes to be more inclusive for that sort of population? And this is something that we all sort of benefit from. For me, the most famous example of an autistic person not being able to fit in, and we almost paying a price for that, is Albert Einstein. The guy got his Ph.D. in physics and then could not get a job as a physicist. Such a typically autistic sort of like experience from there. Luckily for us, when he became a patent clerk, he was so passionate and so driven to do his work that he continued to do his work as a patent clerk, giving us experimental proof of the existence of atoms, discovering the photoelectric effect, which earned him a Nobel Prize, special relativity that dethroned Newton as the final authority on what gravity was. Like, after he had done those things, universities throughout the world was like, oh, wait a minute, the greatest physicist of our time works as a patent clerk. Maybe we should give him a job as a physicist. For me, that so perfectly encapsulates that if we're not thinking about how we can be more inclusive, if we're not thinking about how we can create a space for these folks to thrive and be successful as well, how many Einsteins are we losing? How much great work and effort is being lost through that shortcoming?
Thank you, Dave. Holden, do you have anything to add?
No, I mean, I think everybody said it quite well. My story is that I was very fortunate in many ways. I was born with a very typical autistic profile, but I had many advantages. I'm not discriminated against for being in marginalized groups. And my parents were incredibly supportive and had resources. And probably most importantly, I went to a school where I went to the same grade for 9 years with the same group of people who were incredibly supportive. And so I didn't have any problems at school. If I'd gone to a big public school with more that was more challenging, I could have easily gone in a very different direction. But even with all of that, and those things allowed me to do lots of things in my life. I was the chancellor of the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. I was the provost of Washington University in St. Louis, and now I'm the editor of Science. But I learned when I finally got to points where my public affect and my ability to engage with people who were not from academia, and to ask them questions that weren't based in, sort of what research are you doing? I had challenges with all of that, and eventually ended up getting a diagnosis of ASD. Out of that, it took me a few years before I went public with it, and I give a lot of credit to Bonnie Sweener, who's on this call, and also Dave and AJ, who I met all of them at a meeting where we talked about this. And it's been a great change in my life coming forward with this. And, I've kind of seen it all in terms of how autistic traits play out against different challenges, and very proud to pay it forward and share that with folks when it makes a difference.
Thank you. And that's a nice segue to our next question. Because we all have different experiences of discovering we are neurodivergent. And so I'm going to ask the panelists if they will, if they want to talk about how they discovered they were neurodivergent, and when they learned about it as well, starting with AJ.
Yeah, hey y'all, this is AJ speaking. I was diagnosed with Asperger's as an adult. So I grew up my entire life not knowing I was autistic, which meant that I went through school being labeled as having behavioral problems. And one of the terms that's used now, I really don't like, would be like I would be considered a twice exceptional child in some circles, where I excelled a lot of times academically, but behaviorally, I really struggled. And I think Holden brought up a good point where maybe if I was a different skin color, my behavioral challenges would have been acknowledged as me being autistic or having some type of intellectual or developmental disability. But because I was a black child in predominantly white schools, I was just like a bad kid. Who had so much potential if I could, just not be bad. But then I went to college, and part of not being diagnosed, at least in my experience, was not understanding myself and how I fit into the world, and that caused a lot of depression for me. So I was in therapy. I was in therapy for a long time. And, one day I was in therapy and I was describing an incident I was having with a partner and how like I just fundamentally couldn't understand what was happening and how someone could think that way. And my therapist was like, I think you might be autistic and we should run some tests. And luckily I had great insurance. And so all the really expensive neuro tests weren't that expensive for me. And I found out I was autistic, and it probably saved my life because it gave me a way to understand why I felt so different in the world, and realizing that it was totally okay to feel that way and that nothing was wrong with me. That's just my difference in how I move through the world. So that was my experience.
Thank you for sharing. Ashley.
Yeah, I mean, I guess students told me I was neurodivergent. I'm physically disabled from cancer. So I have an amputation. I'm visibly, I show up and people know I'm disabled. They're not like secrets. I'm also hard of hearing. I have tinnitus. These things are the result of the chemotherapy I had. And so chemo brain's common enough for people who have had really aggressive chemo regimens. But I didn't like recognize that as a form of neurodivergence until I was helping a student group put together a panel about neurodiversity, and they were gonna, educate themselves and each other. This was, you know, pretty much a decade ago. And and I was helping. I booked the ASL interpreters and the cart captioners, and I was doing all the assistive help things. And then they're having this panel about neurodiversity, and they're like talking about this big umbrella category and the historical origins and their own experiences in it. And the students were wonderfully radical. They had someone with bipolar disorder, they had someone with borderline personality disorder, they had two autistic people. It was like diverse in terms of neurodivergence, in terms of the panel. But then they were talking about this, and I whispered to my graduates, like I had a couple of graduate students that I was friends with. I wasn't on their committee. I was in their same age bracket. I was very young. And I was like, hey, I think I'm part of this too. When they were talking about like brain injuries and changes in perception of time. And I was like, oh no. Oh yes, like at that point the band-aid had been ripped off that I like was gonna be multiply disabled anyway. So it was just really nice to think about, being part of a community in like a much more broadly cross disability, cross experience way. And that wasn't just all cancer groups, which tend to have a real different vibe than neurodivergent groups, and that's good and bad for depending on what you need. But no, I for me it was a joyful experience to realize this, and to find community. Yeah.
Thank you. Dave?
Yeah, like AJ, I was diagnosed as an adult with Asperger's syndrome. It actually got started by a friend telling me that she thought I had Asperger's syndrome, and I was offended. And I needed to prove to her that she was wrong, but I can't just tell you you're wrong. I have to quantify and enumerate your wrongness, come back with a bulleted list so you can understand in all the ways that you were wrong. And so as I started researching it, I quickly learned two things. One, I had a lot of misconceptions about autism. Um, you shouldn't trust Hollywood and movies and TV shows to tell you how something works and stuff. I was just as guilty of that as anybody else. And two, I could actually be on the spectrum. And that kicked off a year-long search that ended in a formal diagnosis. And this is actually one of the key reasons why I'm such an advocate, because during that journey, the whole time, look, one of the most important things to happen in my life was to get that diagnosis. I was struggling with these questions of how can I be so smart and so dumb at the same time? Why are these things so hard for me and they're seemingly easy for everybody else? Why do I have such difficulty understanding the people around me? They seem so strange and bizarre. And then I had these answers, and I was able to come to a deeper understanding of myself, a deeper understanding of what differentiated me from other people. And it was just such a relief to have some answers to these questions I've been struggling with my whole life. And so I became an advocate under the thinking of, if we can get the factual information out there, if we can push back against some of these misconceptions and stuff, how many other undiagnosed autistic people might be out there that could find their way to a greater peace and a greater understanding like I did? And that to this day, that motivates me. So it was the greatest thing to happen to me. Now, fun fact, I went back to my friend a year later to admit to her that I was going to come back to her with a bulleted list, and it turned out that she was right. And I said, "Thank you. It turns out you were right. I do have a formal diagnosis." She stared at me for a solid 30 seconds of silence and then finally said, "I was just being sarcastic." And I had to laugh at that because, fun fact, one of the things about autistic people is we have difficulty recognizing sarcasm. That to me was such an apropos ending to that story.
I
The
think the
joke is,
urge to come back with a bulleted list is also very autistic.
yeah, yep. And the joke is we can get a diagnosis by peer review, right? Like we find each other, like we pattern recognition, is a high one. So yeah, the bulleted list was a pretty good tell. Um, Holden, do you have any final thoughts to add?
No, well, just I mean, I kind of told the story of how I ended up getting my diagnosis. I mean, there was a little bit of kind of ableist angle to it that is resonates with some of the other things in the story. So it was really one of my detractors who kind of started a whisper campaign that I had Asperger's as a way to keep me from doing some stuff that I wanted to do when I was at my previous job. And in the end, I'm grateful that he did that because that's what led me to my diagnosis. But you know, it just shows you that the stigma is still very real. And even for somebody like me who, has so many unfair advantages. So for people who are in marginalized groups and beyond, it's even more. So that that's something that motivates me a lot.
Yeah, and that's why panels like this are so important to talk to people that have real experiences and can share those experiences to help spread knowledge. All right, so we're gonna switch gears slightly, but it's still kind of related to what Holden, you've been giving me great segues, Holden. Um, so what barriers have you faced as a neurodivergent individual, especially related to academia and or navigating academia? It doesn't have to be that, but since we're talking to postdocs, if you have stories like that, that'd be great. So AJ?
Yeah, I think in a perverse way, I was really fortunate not to be diagnosed as a kid because I was mainlined, I was mainstream, I wasn't segregated out. I got that experience of an inclusive education. I know that not everyone receives that, or some people have to pay exuberant amounts of money to go to specialized schools or whatever, which is like just another type of segregation in my mind. So growing up, I truly benefited from that. In college, I really struggled because I didn't know that I could get accommodations because I didn't know I was autistic. And so what would happen was at the end of semesters, usually the winter semester, I would get really depressed and just not want to do work. And that's when papers are due and when final exams are. And part of the way my autism manifests is I have zero fear of consequences. So I just wouldn't do my work. I was like, fuck it, I'll take the F, I'll take the bad grade, which as an undergrad is cool. Sometimes, you don't really think about your future and how your GPA affects it. But um, that really hurt me when I decided to go to law school because I had a lower GPA. So I had to, you know, really pitch myself in my application. But I went to law school after I was diagnosed. And so I had to learn how to advocate for myself and navigate the bureaucracy of higher education accommodations. And again, I think I was really fortunate in that I didn't have the experience of having a 504 plan or having an IEP, which is an individualized education plan, and a 504 plan is just from the Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act. They're both disability plans for disabled students. Anyway, I didn't have those, and I didn't have the comfort of that. And something I found working with a lot of disabled students transitioning to higher ed is because their parents and sometimes school advocates had their 504 plan, they never had to advocate for themselves, or someone advocated for them, and they didn't have the schools to go out and the skills to go out and advocate for themselves in higher ed, which can be really frustrating and really cumbersome and really tiresome. But I didn't have all that baggage. I was just like, I know that I'm entitled to this and I'm going to fight for it, and I don't care what you say. And I think that really helped me in terms of transitioning to get the accommodations that I was entitled to. It also helped me because I didn't have the same discriminatory experience of being told this is all you can get and having to accept it. I'd never had that. So I didn't have to accept that, well, we can't do this or we don't know how to do this. I could say you are legally obligated to do it and I will fight you, because I had not been beaten down by the system, which is again is another perverse type of privilege. And so for me, and this sounds again really perverse, but not being diagnosed as a child and being diagnosed as an adult really helped me in terms of my higher education experience and being able to fight for the accommodations that I needed, and being really self-assured about my identity as an autistic person, my identity as a disabled person, my identity as a neurodivergent person. Like I was really confident in all those things because I had the privilege of not being beat down by ableism as a child.
Thank you. Ashley.
Yeah, I'm going to the email that you sent me to remind myself of what the question is. And, I got through my PhD program without knowing I was disabled and without becoming neurodivergent. So what I think about when you ask me about academia and my own experiences is like, how do I survive now? Like I was on the tenure track when I had a year of medical leave and a very bad time, and I've had two lung surgeries for cancer recurrences since then. Right, my life's been interrupted at times when I'm supposed to be my most productive. And part of what makes my existence in academia like easier. So this isn't speaking to a barrier, but like what eases my existence is actually like working with other neurodivergent people. And I don't mean that in like the happy rah rah. I mean, this is a dream. There is an autistic moderator with autistic panelists. You guys wrote out all the questions. We're going to do them in order. There's no like, it's all straightforward. I can just look back at the notes over and over again. So when I get lost, anytime AJ's speaking, I already don't know what the question's going to be. And I'm like, I start to feel a little bit of panic because I've already forgotten the question because I can't hold it in my head that long. It's written down. I have a couple windows open. I know where you're going through every step, Angela. I appreciate the reminder earlier today. Like this is so like wonderfully organized for someone who has trouble holding on, like holding on to when things are happening, holding on to what's like even what's happening now. Like my mind wandered a little bit and all of a sudden, and even if it doesn't wander, AJ is brilliant and I love listening to him. So like no matter what the question is, I wouldn't hold it in otherwise. And like for me, being neurodivergent and finding this community, and then also like always saying yes when autistic people ask me about collaborations and projects, because I know I'm gonna have a better time. I don't know if they're having a better time, but the sort of like direct and honest communication, right? No surprises in terms of structure. And if it's coming, someone will ease us into it a little bit better. I appreciate my autistic friends and colleagues who are good about like trigger warnings and letting people know what's coming up next and just the sort of reminder structure. So like, what can you do to ease some of these barriers? Well, being in community, but I find the people that I like working with the best that I apply for big grant applications and sometimes win them. I am often working in a team that includes people with different types of neurodivergence in ways that actually help us all continue to exist. Because we're going to set things up and structure things in ways that are more helpful for everyone. This is called the curb cut effect in terms of like infrastructure. But when you build it in this way that appreciates that people will be different types of neurodivergent or have different types of disabilities, then then it's actually just a friendlier place to exist in. So thank you, like personally, thank you, Angela. But then also this sort of like larger appreciation of like, how do we actually like think about what the barriers are and like how to create actual work that lets us all operate more at our best. Yeah, it's finding autistic colleagues with ADHD, colleagues, couple with bipolar disorder. I don't think I work with anyone else with chemo brain, but maybe I do, and I've forgotten. That's wholly possible. All right.
Thank you, Ashley, and thank you for acknowledging that I was trying to make everything a lot easier for all of us. Um, Dave, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, so I didn't give this college thing a try until I was in my 30s. And so by the time I came to college, you know, I'd been a journalist for 7 years and worked in public affairs and public relations. I'd been a car salesman for a few years. I'd worked corporate stints from customer service to loss prevention. And during that journey, I had learned the value of like, I need allies. Any organization I go to, I need to find someone that I'm able to form a rapport with, that we're able to talk and kind of get to know. And then I can go to that person with questions of like, why did this person talk to me this way? Or everybody seems mad and I'm not really sure why. You know, I had a sanity check, a sounding board, someone that could give me advice or maybe even advocate on my behalf a little bit. I'd already figured that out in my life. So it wasn't until I was a senior getting my bachelor's degree in physics that I got my autism diagnosis, and I immediately started advocating for myself. Now, my initial attempts were disastrous. You know, I'd basically just walk up to people and say, "Oh, by the way, I found out I'm autistic." And I need some help with these things. And I'd always get pushback like, I don't think you're autistic, or you don't seem autistic to me. Um, you know, it was, I'm very fortunate that I've had a belief for most of my life that we can always reach an understanding. I just have to find the right words or the right tack or the right angle or the right approach to something. So every time I tried to advocate for myself and it failed, I would just reiterate and try again. And then slowly and painfully, I got to where in my graduate degree, I got decent at advocating for myself. And then once I got to that level, things got a lot easier. Now this is back in 2010. I fully believe that today, if I started as a first year grad student, a lot of foundations have already been laid. Where as a society, as a culture, we're talking more about neurodiversity. There are more of these conversations. It's not just such a, you know, oh my gosh, what is that word? People already have sort of like a, so it would be a lot easier for me to advocate to go through that process today than it was 15 years ago. But I don't want to say that it's easy. But advocating for yourself is probably one of the most important things for a neurodivergent person to thrive and be successful. Going through a graduate program, working in academia, and like with autistic people, we're talking about people that fundamentally have a social disability. So we're saying the trick to getting what you want is to be good at something you're not naturally good at. That's a tough ask. And so I think as organizations, what we need to do is we need to be educating our professors. We need to be educating our student services. We need to be getting some good information in their hands and some good best practices so that young autistic person who doesn't have years and years of experience as a car salesman and figured out things the hard way in themselves, but are like 18, 20 years old, you know, just getting into this stuff or went straight to bachelor's into grad school, they're not going to have those skill sets, or their skill sets are not going to be nearly so developed. So we need to do more heavy lifting to make that a little bit easier for them and get them there.
Thank you. Holden?
Yeah, I mean, I had a lot of challenges socially as a child and, you know, young adult that I didn't really think that much about. And like Dave said, a lot of people even now say, well, you don't seem autistic. Um, the rubber hit the road when I was in charge of a university of 60,000 people, and people expected me to perform uh, to perform on TV and in front of groups and stuff. And I could do that extremely well if I was interested in what I was saying, and not very well if I had to go talk about something that I wasn't all that crazy about. And guess what? At a huge university, there are plenty of programs there that aren't really things that I would have started myself, right? Like, sorry if anybody has one of these, but an undergraduate business degree, I'm not a huge fan of that. And so when I would go try to pitch the undergraduate business donors, they could kind of tell that I wasn't like super warm to the whole thing. But I had gotten to where I was mainly because when you're in academia and you're somebody like me and maybe some others who have a hard time starting conversations and stuff, you can always break the ice with somebody by saying, tell me what you're working on. And I was always voraciously interested in the answer. And so when I got into a role where I had to come up with other questions to ask people, and then I had to pretend like I was interested in what they were telling me. I did not do well at that. The people who put me where I was thought it was cool to have this nerdy chancellor who would be kind of a symbol of how knowledge can play out in the world and a symbol to get more people to study science and stuff. But they didn't really think about the fact that, there was another side to that coin until they saw it. And there wasn't any space really in the South, for at a big Southern university to accommodate that. And I found myself in a challenging situation that I would have had to perform my way out of, which I couldn't do. I fixed a lot of analytical problems and then got myself out of town. So the barriers that I felt are really the stereotypes of what a leader is supposed to be. And the stereotypes that we have of, of course, there's stereotypes about leadership that, they're a man, they're commanding, they're, all these stereotypes that we all have. And they're also somebody who can work a room and do a lot of things that are hard for some people with my kind of brain. So I went to WashU where I was the provost, not the chancellor, and I got to mostly hang with the people on the campus who I knew how to interact with, and then I came to run science. So I've had two great jobs since I left, which because of my awareness of this as it built, I didn't go get another job as a college president. I've only taken jobs where I was going to be with my people, and who are academics and people who are working on things that I have common interests with. And so that's the barrier, I guess, is that with the stereotypes that are in the world, me leading some big organization and being extroverted and all these stereotypes that everybody has about what that is, that's not something I'm going to do. But the awareness of this has allowed me to do great things that I love, where my traits map well onto the job.
Thank you. We have about 10 minutes left, so I'm going to jump to our last question, which is, do you have any tips for folks that think they might be neurodivergent? And then I will add the note that, when looking for resources, to please be careful about the resources you're looking at, because some of them can be extremely ableist or extremely scammy. They want to take your money. So, please be careful and when looking for resources. But AJ, do you have any tips for folks that think they might be neurodivergent?
Yeah, this is AJ. I think that's a difficult question only because we live in a world where sometimes labels can be really harmful. But like in my experience, it wasn't necessarily the label that helped me. It was understanding how I fit into the world and where my community was and what I needed to support myself. So, in the time between graduating from undergrad and law school, I worked a lot of jobs and I got fired a lot. But then I got diagnosed as autistic and I was able to communicate to my supervisors, like, this is who I am and this is how I work and this is the environment I need to be in. And all that is to say that is if someone feels like they are neurodivergent or may have some type of cognitive disability or mental disability or psychiatric disability, I think going out and seeking that diagnosis can be helpful, but also just understanding that it's okay to be different and how to communicate that to people can be just as valuable, right? Like, um, a lot of times you don't necessarily have to be diagnosed to be protected by the ADA. Oftentimes a diagnosis is helpful. When we're talking about in academia, a lot of disability offices require that paperwork. But if you look at the ADA, you just have to be perceived as being disabled, which is kind of nebulous. All that's to say, like, if you want to be diagnosed and pathologization is helpful for you, go out and find the resources and all those things. But if you feel like that stuff won't be helpful to you, it won't be beneficial, it will actually be harmful to you because sometimes being labeled as having whatever kind of disability can be extremely harmful and perpetuate ableism and bigotry that you experience. You know, maybe don't go out and seek that and just find your community and find how you can best advocate for yourself in a system that kind of put you in a hard place, whether you are diagnosed or not.
Thanks, AJ. And yeah, I think you make a really great point. There are a lot of things you can do to advocate for yourself where you don't necessarily need a diagnosis. That if you figure out what works for you and is helpful for you, that you can advocate without a diagnosis too. Ashley.
Yeah, I mean, a good calendar system, setting alarms as reminders. I mean, my tips are like really sort of pedestrian in some ways, but I learned so many of them from other people. And the wonderful thing, like I love the label neurodivergent, that it is this big category. It was created by people with autism and ADHD having discussions about how their minds work, but it was built bigger, right? It's a much larger tent, and you don't actually like have to have a diagnosis to understand that your brain works a little bit differently and that maybe you should be in touch with cross disability groups, that you should get involved in local advocacy, um, in ways that, especially if it's like social and community and advocacy groups, you don't need a label to actually learn from other people in your community and learn tips and tricks and things just about like navigating the university, navigating the places that you live, like who are the good diagnosticians in your region, especially if you are a woman who is trying to get a diagnosis as an adult. That's going to be really more tricky for you than for other people. So speaking to other people in your community who have gotten diagnoses, who they've spoken to, participating in these groups also has the wonderful effect of finding the doctors you might want to see, finding the therapist that might be useful for someone who is neurodivergent. You know, I think there are a lot of just really practical impacts to thinking about cross disability advocacy and making sure that neurodiversity is part of every cross disability advocacy movement.
Thank you, Dave. And there's a question in the Q&A which is kind of related. So if you have answers, that are there any disabled in STEM communities or organizations that you recommend for the folks in academia too?
Yeah, I mean, for my recommendations, I can keep this actually quite simple. We can and do talk to members of the public all the time. It's actually one of the most common questions I get from the public is I just found out that I might be neurodivergent or I found out I might be autistic. How do I get a diagnosis? What are the tips and best practices and stuff? That's a conversation I have about a dozen times a week. And so what I would recommend is that if you or anybody you know is autistic or neurodivergent or suspect that they might be autistic and neurodivergent and have questions related to diagnoses or particularly any questions related to employment, you can just reach out to us. You can go to our website. find our contact, Colette Rubinski, let her know, hey, I have some questions. Is there somebody that I can talk to? She'll schedule a one-on-one Zoom meeting with me. I'll sit down and chat with you and point you towards resources. As far as like organizations that we recommend, are there any disabled and STEM communities or organizations that you recommend for support? You know, I find that for me, some of the most impactful, powerful organizations are like local organizations. So, like Autism Tennessee is a nonprofit that we've been working closely with since the beginning, because not only do they focus, like many nonprofits, on children on the spectrum, but rarely for these nonprofits, they also focus on adults on the spectrum. They're one of the few people who realize, oh, kids who need help grow up to become adults who need help. And so I personally support them in a number of ways, including volunteering and work and stuff, because of all the great work that they're doing. I also encourage at universities and institutions to look for self-advocate groups, look for peer support groups. And if one doesn't exist, maybe start the journey for getting one started. You know, here at Vanderbilt University, I talk to a number of autistic students. Most of the time, I would be like the first person on the autism spectrum capable of getting a college degree that they had spoken with. And I realized that these folks are not finding each other. So I reached out to a few of them and asked, hey, should we form a student support group? And they all said, like, yes. And so that laid the foundation for what eventually became the Vanderbilt Autism and Neurodiversity Alliance. It's a student-led organization. Students, faculty, staff, anyone who's a part of the Vanderbilt community are welcome to be a member. And we come together and we support each other and we encourage each other. And sometimes something goes wrong with a professor or something goes wrong with the system that this one autistic student is freaking out about, and we're able to step in and help them navigate. Some of us are in positions of power, and so we can get messages into the right ears at the right time. So it was an organization that our first couple of years we were putting out a lot of fires and dealing with a lot of misconceptions and bad practices that was happening. But it's been a few years since I've had that conversation because Vanderbilt University itself, the organizations within itself, learned from those experiences and adjusted their practices and stuff to where now they're doing a much better job servicing these populations. So today we're not so much that, but you know, we have members of VANA that the only socializing they get in their college experience is going to those VANA meetings or talking to those VANA members. So even if we're not there to put out any fires, we still recognize that it's important that we keep doing what we can and we keep supporting the students as best we can.
All right, thank you. And Holden, you have a minute. Do you have any final thoughts?
Two things. So one is, you know, people ask me a lot, should I disclose? Only you can decide that. There's still, the stigma's still real, and anybody who does or doesn't disclose is doing the right thing if they have made that decision themselves and not having had it made for them. And then on the tip side, you know, what I do is I tell the people I need to interact with, this is what you need to do if you want to communicate with me. I don't read nonverbal cues and facial expressions very well, and I don't send those things very well either. And so when you need something, you have to tell me. And I know that can be hard for some people, but that's the only way I can help you. And that I really do care about you, but I can't, I might not express it until you tell me in words that you're hurting or that you need something. And most people are pretty receptive and grateful for that information. So those, you know, transparency with the people who are close to you is good, even if it doesn't include saying the actual diagnosis. And whether you disclose or not is a complicated and personal decision that only you can make, but you can make it better if you talk to other people who are knowledgeable about it.
Yeah, I think that's the perfect end to the panel. And thank all of our wonderful panelists for being here. You are all fantastic, and I hope that this at least gave some helpful knowledge to the people that are attending. And I will turn it back over to Tom.
Thanks, Angela. We're going to take just a couple minutes break and then start at the top of the hour with our session 2. But thank you to everyone on the first panel. It's a fantastic way to get us kicked off in this year's Equity Summit. Thank you.
Thanks for including me.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you. This is great.